Welcome back to another episode of Riding with Mr. Ruckdashel. Today is episode 11, and we are talking about dialogue. We're dialoguing about dialogue. Although, yeah, dialogue means two people. So I guess this is kind of a monologue about dialogue, which actually sounds a lot better. Man, that would have been a really good title. Yeah. Well, too late for that. So dialogue less. More better? Question mark. If you haven't already guessed, the general idea of today is that, is dialogue actually better when we use it less? And if you haven't already, go ahead and get your writing journals out. Writing journals by hand or by screen with typey machine. Typety, typey, type. Here we go. So, big idea from today really is that writers sparingly use dialogue. And unless, we're really bringing out the conflict in the story or emphasizing character traits. And it's not like you're forbidden from using it, but if you're going to use a lot or use it more often, or you've got a chunk that's going to be dialogue based, you should be really thinking to yourself, what are we learning about my character and how are we bringing out the conflict? Because it says to use it sparingly. So if you're going to use it, try to do it for those things, but it does make sense if your story's plot needs or would make sense if it had some sort of talking, dialoguing, monologuing, thinking. And when I'm doing this today, when we're talking about this lesson, sometimes thinking is enough, and thinking can take the place of dialogue at times. So just keep that in mind. And we say sparingly because, think about this. Here's something we can all relate to. There is someone in everybody's life that we've met, and sometimes we've been this person ourselves, who keeps on going and talking and will not stop. I don't care about this story you're telling me. Now, that sounds kind of harsh and cruel, I realize. But I remember one time when I was a kid, I was kind of telling a story and someone was just like, hey, just come on, get to the point. And I have not gotten over that. I've gotten over it from the standpoint of like, I get it. I don't really care. I don't hold a grudge against that person. Like, I really like that person. They're a great person. However, I haven't gotten over it from the standpoint of that stuck with me. And if I'm going to tell a story, it is not going to be one of those long and winding ones. Now, I tend to, if you can't already tell, be a bit of a talker when you get me going. So when I say I don't tell those long-winded stories, I mean, I've really worked hard to make sure that I don't, because I probably still do every now and then when I'm not thinking about it. But I do try hard not to. And the same thing should be said for stories we tell. We don't want our dialogue to just run away with itself. We don't want it to take over the story, because we all have that brother or sister who kind of goes, and then, and our dialogue can almost become like that as well. And nobody wants that. Ain't nobody got time for that. So here is our example that we've left off with from last time, where we added in some setting details that had to do with time, and it helped us create a time shift. So our character had sort of been locked in this office. Probably not locked in. I think that there would be some issues with the principal if he was locking students in offices. However, what I mean is they were probably in the office for a lot longer than they realized. Time just slipped right by. So that's what you see there in that blue. That was what we did last time. And you know what? I should have color-coded today's in a new color. but it's so different and so much is missing and replaced that it will be pretty obvious. Maybe if I can get fancy with my video editing, by the time you see this video, it will be colored, and then this whole conversation I've just had will be pointless. Super. So the part that I am looking at here, if you couldn't have guessed, is the part that is kind of in the middle and continues on where I have tons of dialogue. And I remember this section and the sections that come after it, I felt like I was just stuck. I didn't know what else to do besides dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. But I knew it was wrong. I knew as I was writing all of this dialogue in, I was just going, this is too much. Like, I'm not entertained by this. This is kind of boring to have to hear this. But I felt like I needed it. And today, I've realized I don't. So down there at the bottom, I'm going to kind of read over the little bit there, just so you can see the difference. I'm going to start with Jimmy. Jimmy, just stand in line and wait to be picked, he commanded. But what if he won't let me? Or what if I'm picked last? He whined. Already frustrated just to hear his voice, David snapped. Just do it. Blend in. Who cares if you are last? Be happy you get to be here. But... Jimmy, shut up. Don't you get it? We don't want to be friends with you. Do you see everyone else here? We aren't all friends. So don't try to force us to be friends with you. That's not how friendship works. Just blend in. David, what are you doing? Yelled Quentin. Okay, so I end up taking a big chunk of this out. And the reason I took a big chunk out was I just don't know that this really fits with my character. If we're using dialogue, it should either advance the conflict or tell us some information about our character, like learn about our character, because they're talking. And while it kind of advances our conflict, I don't think that this is how my character truly would have went about this. In the previous paragraph, David has an empty stomach feeling. He kind of feels nauseous. He doesn't know what to do. He feels alone. He's lost. He doesn't want to make a choice. And then all of a sudden, he marches right out. I wrote, David made a straight line right for him. All of a sudden, he turns the switch, marches right out to Jimmy, and commands him. You know, this is why we revise. This is why we reread. That doesn't make sense for my character. And here's, instead, what does make sense. Using less dialogue. Look at how much less writing there is. So the only section that I really changed is that whole bottom half. And so I'll read it now instead. And notice how much a little dialogue I have. And really, at this point, I've actually done the most by getting rid of dialogue. I don't know that the dialogue I have there really actually helps us. It advances the conflict, I'll say. But I don't know that we really learn too much more about our character yet. Tomorrow, we will be delving deeply into dialogue again. And tomorrow, I'm thinking that that's when you'll really see how dialogue can bring out some character traits. But that's tomorrow. Right now, we're seeing what we can do when dialogue is deleted. Wow, my alliteration, just going to say, is pretty on point right now. Bring! This was the moment where he had to decide, and he wasn't ready. He continued his slow pace as the halls ebbed and flowed. One moment they were full, the next he was alone again. Reaching the door, he could see his group already gathered, getting ready to play football. There was Jimmy standing on the outside of the group, trying to get everyone's attention. By the time David had trudged across the field, the draft was finishing. David, what are you doing? Yelled Quentin. You're on our team. Jimmy was standing there, looking around, waiting to be given further instruction. He'd expected things to change after our crew had been taken to the office, and hadn't counted on further rejection. Just say something to Jimmy about him being on our team. Turning and running, David yelled, "Am I kicking?" Quentin was standing there with the football in his hand waiting, stretching back and forth, impatient. Clouds of dust kicked up as David arrived in their end zone, and the ball was tossed up to him. Turning back around to kick, he paused. "Don't say anything about Jimmy. Don't say anything." And that's where I end it. You'll notice that I, in fact, replaced quite a bit of my dialogue with some thinking. And again, we could overdo the thinking, but I feel like my character is really an inside kind of person. They think inside before they say anything, before they do anything. He's conflicted earlier about having to make a choice. And the more he thinks about it and the less action he takes, he kind of gets his way then. He doesn't have to make a choice. But as you're going to see tomorrow in my example right here, the next part I add on, he ends up starting to make that choice. But it's in a way that I think really fits with our character because dialogue advances the conflict. And I've done that with my thinking. And the little bits I had, like, am I kicking? In other words, he's avoiding. He thinks, should I help Jimmy? Well, am I kicking? It gives him an opportunity to move on. So, I advance the conflict here. We continue to see that he's thinking in his head about what he should do, doesn't want to make a choice. And tomorrow, you're going to see, really even more so, his actual dialogue, not just thinking, shows what kind of a person he is. All right, to-do list. Again, reread your whole story. I know. A lot of rereading of the story. But in order to revise, you've got to sift it through our one little lens that we're looking at each time. That lens is what makes the changes. So today's lens is, as we reread, ask yourself, is the dialogue serving a purpose? Less is more. Do not be afraid to delete things. Do not be afraid to throw stuff out. It's okay. I give you permission. Now, if you want to hold on to some of these things from before and sort of write a new copy of it, that's what I do. I'm too afraid to get rid of the original bit, and so I'll make a new copy of it, like a new doc, and I'll write the new section over. Now, I'll copy and paste some of the parts in that I'm going to start the section with, and the new part, I just start writing over. If you're writing all of this by hand, it's a little trickier, but you can totally still do it. Just circle a section that you're going to revise and rewrite. Move on to the next closest page or on the same page and start to rewrite. Easiest way to do it. It'll be just fine. And there we go. Dialogue is less, more, better? Question mark? As in, less dialogue is more better. Well, I hope that today's lesson was even more better than yesterday's. And I hope that all of you are having more and more fun each day with this, because I keep surprising myself. I sit down here to do one of these lessons and I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta do it. And then it is fun. I mean, I'm only doing these because it's fun. I'm not doing this because I have to. So, all of you out there, I really hope that you guys are doing well. All of you girls and boys watching this, listening to this. All of you students in my class, I hope that you guys are getting to spend some more time with the people that you love, or at least you loved before we had this long break, and that you're really documenting some of the interesting things that are happening to us in addition to this writing we do. I will see all of you very soon. Thursday we'll be back on a Zoom again, unless of course you're not in my class and you're watching this, then you won't be in my Zoom. All right, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace.